Join our email list, also linked in the show notes. You know how there are some kinds of geniuses who can just seem to invent or create a solution to virtually any problem that they put in front of themselves? Well, such is the case with our guest today. His name is David Schmidt, and he started out inventing technology for the U.S. military to support the health of Navy SEALs. And he's now gone on to invent a product that is groundbreaking in the field of phototherapy. It's a product that uses the infrared light of our own bodies to stimulate mitochondrial function. It's really crazy. So join us as we trace David's journey through his research and his inventions, where we end up getting a peek even into the mind of the divine. This is a really good one. Have fun. All right, David Schmidt, welcome to the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. Very excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine. Happy to be talking about one of my favorite subjects.
Okay. So, as you know, we focus a lot on light on this podcast. We particularly focus a lot on the benefits of sunlight and going outside and, being in nature. And I want to sort of get into your history of how you came to it. But just to kick things off, you are currently running a company that you founded that uses a very specific type of light therapy or phototherapy. So could you just tell us how you define phototherapy and what is going on with the product that you invented?
So I would define phototherapy as the science of treating the body with light to produce specific effects. And the term phototherapy is rather broad and actually historically is not really thought of as being scientific, although phototherapy historically has been recognized for treating people of disorders resulting from seasonality. So when it's a little bit cloudier out and people become depressed, it's recognized that light therapy is a sound and proven treatment for that. However, more specifically, photobiomodulation, which you could consider to be a branch of phototherapy, is where we really want to understand how is light triggering specific biochemical changes in the body. And that's something that's extraordinary to investigate because by pursuing this path of research, we can be developing systems, be developing new technologies that can have some very dramatic impact on our overall health and wellness and even longevity.
Yes. And so we are, and this audience would be fully on board with those ideas. A lot of our audience would probably own a red light therapy device of some sort and have done research on photobiomodulation. And there's a lot of research looking at the effects of particularly red lights on the body has become a really well-researched area. But your product doesn't actually use an external source of light.
Right.
This is what kind of blows my mind about what you've invented.
Yeah, and this actually, it started with the U.S. military in the sense that I had been designing survival equipment for the crew of submarines. And on a sub, or really in any military operation, having power generation for systems becomes a huge issue. And so when you're thinking about how you're going to deploy troops and assets out into the field, how are you going to provide power and other resources? So, and that matter is even compounded more on a submarine. So I was invited to be part of a mini-sub program, and the crew of the mini-sub were Navy SEALs. And the objective was to see how could we keep them awake for 30 to 60 hours without having to use drugs or stimulants. So I thought, okay, let me take a look at this. And it was about a 3-year journey. And I finally came up with this idea that we could create a passive device using stereoisomers of amino acids and sugars and use that as a communication device. So just like we have cell phones, we communicate today, this would be a device that could communicate with the body and turn on fat burning along with later on other things. But that's how it got started. It was really out of the need to find a way to improve the energy of Navy SEALs and do it in a way where it wouldn't require a power source.
Okay, so you were tasked by the U.S. military with finding a way to keep Navy SEALs alert while living on a submarine, and so you had like extremely limited resources, and they were like, "Okay, David, figure out how to do that."
Didn't exactly happen that way. What had happened was I invented a power generation system for subs.
Okay, all right.
And the issue was that during an emergency, it needed oxygen to power the generator. And they said to me, well, we can't do this because we don't have enough oxygen on the sub to drive it. And I said, well, what are you doing for generating oxygen on a sub in an emergency? Long story short, I ended up inventing a better way to make oxygen on a sub. And so I was invited into a program with this mini sub. And so they said, take a look at this program and the mission statement and see if you can make a contribution to the program. So they really gave me a clean slate, and I was able to go and say, what I could do. And this is what I came up with.
Wow. Were you always inventing things, like even as a child?
I am sorry to say for my parents that I was, because when I was about 8, I became very, very curious about the world around me and would start to take apart my parents' appliances because I wanted to find out how they worked. There was an early computer that we had in the house, a Pong game that some people remember from way back when, and I remember taking that apart and trying to figure out what was this computer inside it. So yes, from a very early age, I wanted to understand the world around me.
Because I'm just struck by that part of your story where you said, the problem that we were having was that there wasn't enough oxygen. So I just invented a better way to create oxygen. That wouldn't necessarily be the default solution for a lot of people, to be able to just sort of reinvent the problem from the ground up.
Yeah, maybe not. So maybe not, but it was a fun journey and fun doing that.
Okay, so your talents as an inventor, while perhaps challenging for your parents, brought you to a place where you were recognized and given opportunities to just come up with solutions. And so in the situation with the military, the solution was around keeping the Navy SEALs awake without them having to take any exogenous substances.
I probably should, that's correct. And what I should probably say is years before that, I had went to college in Westchester and I got a degree in management information systems, so business and computer science. And I worked for a year for a company designing medical devices because I had the opportunity. And then I went back to Pace to get a degree in biology. And I convinced the chairman of the biology department, Dr. William Ventura, who's a pharmacologist, to let me use his lab because I wanted to do cancer research. So I had a hypothesis about how we could potentially selectively destroy cancer cells by manipulating the cell membrane of the cancer cell versus a healthy cell, and was actually successful doing that. But that's important because that experience in energy medicine opened my mind to what would be possible. And then later on, when this opportunity came up, I thought, okay, let me go back and see if we can approach this from an energetic perspective as opposed to relying on some type of natural substance or some type of pharmaceutical.
Right. Wow. So what was your insight in when you were doing the cancer experiments?
Yeah, my insight with that, as much as I think I'd want to share with that, I had gotten a donation from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and also from a company in New Jersey. And I was working with two different types of neuroblastomas, a C1300 and a TBJ. And the difference between the two is one is immunogenic and one is non-immunogenic. And basically, what I was doing was using a high voltage. This would normally be associated with air ionization. So you could duplicate these circumstances in nature. And I was using a specially designed magnet that I had made, and basically using a magnetic field to temporarily increase tissue conductivity, and then using this high voltage electrical charge to neutralize the membrane potential selectively around the cancer cell, and that proved to be effective. But yeah, being a college student, I didn't exactly have the money or the resources to try to market that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing how many potential solutions there are in the world, that it's the systems and processes that often hold us back from connecting with them.
I would say so. And there's a really important message there, is that when people find themselves in a place which is, let's say, dealing with a health challenge or really any challenge in life, there is always a solution. Our world, was created to have many solutions to these problems, and I would say if people pray and they turn to God, they can find the answers.
Yeah. Yeah, that idea of there always being a solution is is a guiding principle in my life, for sure. And this whole podcast exists because I was up against a wall at one point with, a not super serious health condition, but it was, chronic fatigue. So it was really lowering the quality of my life. And yeah, I was feeling extremely frustrated with the available options. And I went into a meditative state. And I said, there must be something. I just don't know about it yet. There must be more. And my mind flashed to an interview with someone who talked about the healing power of light. And so down the rabbit hole I went. But I completely agree with you. And thank you for sharing that message with people, right? Because especially with health issues, when our physical and mental states are so compromised, it can be very difficult to maintain that mindset of like, okay, let's keep looking. Must be something I haven't tried yet. So thank you for that. All right. So light. So it was working with the military on that particular project. Is that what sparked you to start looking more seriously at phototherapy and inventing devices around that concept?
So I was doing this work through government contractors, and the timeline on this is what had happened was I spent a few years developing this, and then 9/11 occurred. And if you weren't developing weapons for the military, you couldn't really talk to people. And I had a family to support. And so I thought, okay, I've developed this technology. Surely there are going to be people that are interested in increasing fat burning and energy. So let me start talking to doctors about this, and athletes and personal trainers and acupuncturists and football teams. So I was living in the Atlanta area at the time, and just started to make phone calls and visit people and show them the technology. And the response that I got was extremely positive. And then it was down to the point where, okay, I have to figure out how am I going to do clinical studies on this? How are we going to market it? And how can we set up manufacturing? So that was about a 2-year journey with the very first product that we have, Energy Enhancer. And then later, once the company was established and getting started, that allowed me the time to go back and really research some other applications for this. So how can we create devices that use a blend of different wavelengths of light to trigger these beneficial effects in the cell? So I would say the single biggest difference between LifeWave and other light therapy devices is that these products use modulated light, which have information that can trigger a specific biochemical effect. In this particular case, what we're trying to do is turn on mitochondrial function and turn on synthesis of specific peptides that can improve our health.
Okay. And what I find so fascinating about your product is that there is no external light source. You're working with the infrared light of our bodies.
Exactly. So our bodies, well, yes, our bodies are going to emit infrared energy. We can pick that up with infrared imaging, and we've done a number of studies like that. But there's also biophoton emission from the body.
Mm-hmm.
And this was discovered by Fritz Popp. And I happened to be very fortunate 20 years ago to meet one of his colleagues, Dr. Carl Merritt, who's a biomedical engineer in California. So we had this conversation about Dr. Popp's work, and we later on did a study in California where we took people and we put their hands into a chamber that was completely dark, and we monitored the biophoton emission off their hands. And then we wanted to see, okay, can we augment that with the patch technology, which we were able to. So I would say.
Okay, so I just want to clarify. So you worked
Yes.
with a colleague of Fritz Albert Popp. There will be people listening to this who have read his work, are very familiar with him. We love him in this world. His insights were instrumental in how we understand human biology really works, not how we were originally taught. So you worked with a colleague of his to measure the biophotons coming off the human body, and then you applied the patch that you've developed to see if it would have an effect, and then retested the same hand to see if it would have an effect on the biophoton emission?
Yes.
Is that
so
correct?
Let me drill down on that. Let me drill down on some specifics there. So
please.
The infrared energy comes off the body, and as well as the biophotons, and this will activate the materials inside the patch. So the patches contain stereoisomers of amino acids and sugars, and this is what forms this communication channel with the body. So the patch essentially acts as a reflector of different wavelengths of light. They stimulate the skin with very low levels of light, and the amount of power there is in the picowatts. It's negligible. But it only takes 1 or 2 photons to actually turn on receptors in the body. So, and this will lead to measurable changes in both the blood and the urine. So we've accumulated over 80 clinical studies to demonstrate these effects. So the patch will stimulate the skin with very low levels of light. It turns on cytochrome C oxidase, which I know you know all about, and that as a mediator will then elevate ATP production in the mitochondria. And now that we have more ATP, now we can make more hormones, we can heal the body faster, the metabolism improves, and so forth. What happens with biophotons, though, is really fascinating because it gives us some insight into how we can potentially stop the aging process. So when we look at the biophysics of the cell, and it's in a marriage with the biochemistry. The two of them have to be coexisting in order for us to have optimum health. That what Dr. Pop, of course, found was that all living cells were emitting these highly coherent pulses of light. And we certainly found in our testing that this is coming from the hydrogen bonds in the DNA. And if you want to come back to that, we can. But what's important about this is that the biophotons will be responsible for signal induction and signal transduction effects in the cell. So the cell communications, the communications that are happening within the cell and how cells are communicating with their environment. That's all happening with light. And the light, of course, is initiating the change in the biochemistry. But to your point, what's happening is that as we age, the body actually emits more light. And this isn't a good thing because the cells are leaking. And when they're leaking this light, it interferes with the ability of the cells to be in homeostasis, be in balance. So what we found with the energy patches when we did this back in 2008 or 9 is that it decreases the light emission from the body to improve homeostasis. So it brings the body back to balance. And this is a very powerful anti-aging mechanism that you don't see with supplementation or other things.
Right. It's getting to more of the root cause of the signs and symptoms of aging versus just treating the symptoms.
When we look at this is my principal area of research.
Okay.
Is that I would prefer not to age and even become younger. So the question is scientifically, how do we go about doing that? So in our lab, we'll make observations about species that don't age. So this would be, our research has included planaria, hydractinia, ants, specific species of ants.
Oh,
and
I don't know what those first two are.
A planaria is a flatworm.
Okay.
And it has remarkable, you probably learned about this in high school biology, but there are these worms, and when you cut them in half, they will regenerate that lost part of their body in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. But they're immortal.
Right.
The fascinating thing, about 20 to 25% of the planaria are stem cells, and those stem cells never age. So as long as you give the planaria food, water, and protection, they won't age. They're immortal.
That's crazy.
Yes.
Okay, so planaria, ants. What were some of the other non-aging?
So hydractinia.
Okay.
So hydractinia.
I don't know what those are either.
Okay, so hydractinia, it's or you could call them hydra. They are these little small sea creatures. They're usually found embedded into coral, and they have these tentacles. And the reason why we study them in stem cell research, we did this work at the National University of Ireland, is that you cut off a tentacle, and they'll regrow a new tentacle. But if you give the hydractinia a dye, you can actually photograph or video the stem cells migrating from different parts of their body to the injury site. So this allows us to see if a therapy, and in this case an energy therapy that I developed, can increase the speed at which the stem cells get to the injury site and ultimately speed up the healing process. But the hydractinia also do not age. So that's been a species that we've studied as well.
Okay. And what have you found from studying those? So that was.
Well, if you wanted the big headline, I think what I have found is proof of the existence of God. And I am a Christian, and so I don't need any proof to believe in God, but I happen to find it nonetheless during the course of my research. And I had been focusing on lobsters at one point. And what's so fascinating about lobsters is not only don't they age, but they actually get stronger as they age. And so I wanted to understand, how is this happening? So I was thinking about in the Bible how it says that the life is in the blood. And so I thought maybe we take this literally. Obviously, if from thousands of years ago with all these battles, you cut somebody and then they bleed to death. So maybe it came from that. But I thought I'm going to take this literally, and I'm going to study the blood of lobsters and see what I can find. And I started to find a code in light emissions from the lobster. So most scientists, if you research this subject, they'll say, well, the lobster produces an infinite amount of telomerase, and this enzyme regenerates the telomeres, and that's why they don't age. And that certainly has a lot to do with it. I'm not discrediting that theory, because there's a good basis for it. What I'm saying is there's something else going on other than just the biochemistry, and it has to do with the light emission from the lobsters, and it's much more important than what's going on with the telomeres. So I found this code. I found these light emissions within lobsters, some within the blood, some not, but it formed a biological code. And I said, this cannot be here by accident. This is very much like a computer code. It's a design. So then I decided I was going to try to take that information and create new technology that human beings could use to stop aging. And so I did that, and I actually got several patents on that technique. So we fast forward a bit, and I'm doing a Bible study, and it happens to be on Bible codes. And in the study, we're taking the book of Genesis, very first sentence, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, and converting that to Hebrew, and then converting Hebrew over into numbers. So for those that aren't familiar with it, it's called gematria, but it's the process by which we can convert Hebrew over into number. Same as with Greek. And that first sentence in the book of Genesis forms a series of numbers. I'm looking at the numbers, and I get my calculator out, and I thought, I've seen this before. So I started to make some calculations, and it turned out that the code that's in the very first sentence of the book of Genesis is the same code in lobsters.
No. I don't know what to say. That's wow.
So God, the creator of the universe, who created everything, put his fingerprint or signature in numbers in living species. And we can use that information to create new types of light therapy devices that can potentially stop and reverse human aging, not to mention treatment of disease. So that's where I see this going.
Wow. That is an incredible, incredible story. The fact that you even found yourself in a place where you were doing the work to find the code and you happen to also have the code from the lobster's blood in your research and then match them up. I don't even know what to say. That's one of the craziest synchronicities I've ever heard.
I'll give you a specific example, which is really crazy, along these same lines. So we go and look at the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and we all know the story about there's the tree of knowledge and there's the tree of life. And I was thinking a little bit further about this, and I thought, what if the secret of the tree of life is nothing more complicated than converting that into a number and then converting that into light, right? Because we know that God used sound and light as the basis for creation. So I did that. I took the term tree of life and then I put it into a online converter to convert it into Hebrew. And then I took the Hebrew and again used an online converter to translate that into a number, and it comes out to 159. So 159, I thought, what if that is a sound? And what if that's so we would treat that as a literal frequency, 159 hertz. If we double that and we continue doubling that, we can transpose that frequency into a wavelength of light. And then we can use another online calculator to convert the frequency to a wavelength. Well, long story short, if you do that, the number that you get is 857 nanometers. That number is the wavelength of light that we use in the infrared to turn on the mitochondria. And when we turn on the mitochondria, it gets the cells to function like a younger cell and changes the gene expression so that the cells function as younger, healthier cells. So literally, the term tree of life is symbolic of turning on mitochondrial energy and turning on youth.
Wow. Okay, so the phrase tree of life converted into Hebrew, converted into a number, and then that number then comes out to the exact nanometer required to turn on our mitochondria.
That's exactly right. If you were to, now, with the common wavelength that's used in research is 850 nanometers. And that's because the LED that is available is in that wavelength. If there were an 857 nanometer bulb, you would use that. I happen to use 855 nanometers in my research because plus or minus 3 nanometers, we don't really find there to be a big difference.
Okay.
But the point is that this information that was encoded into the Bible 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, whatever the number is, there is no way people back then could have known that that number was the number was going to be turned into a wavelength of light that could actually stimulate the mitochondria. They just didn't simply have that kind of knowledge back then that we're aware of.
Right.
Right. That we're aware
Unless they did.
Unless they did. Right.
It's so interesting because as you're telling me this story, I'm recalling an interview I just did with a researcher called John Stewart Reed, who researches sound. And he was explaining to me how sound creates infrared light. And then he also tied it back to the Bible. And he is, I don't think, a religious person. That was just clearly, he was like, that is more of a statement of scientific truth than I think we've realized.
I am familiar with Dr. Reed's work, and he invented the, he works in cymatics.
Yes.
And he invented a cymoscope or somatoscope so you could visualize the vibrations in sound with water.
Yes.
Fascinating work. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's very interesting to me that it ties in exactly with what you're saying. He's coming through the sound angle and you're coming through the light angle. Wow. It's a whole new world.
It is.
Yeah.
It is, because what we've actually found with this is that if you take these, I'm not sure whether or not you should refer to them as biological codes or biblical codes or sacred codes. I don't know how to refer to it yet. But what I do know is that when we take this information and create technology from it, we see some really extraordinary things. So one of the first things that I did was I built this piece of equipment that was about, I'm looking over here because I go off into my lab over that way. I have a table that is, let's say, about 3 feet wide and 9 feet long, and that was where the first piece of equipment was put to use this technology. And one of the things that we did was we created a new structure in water. And what happened was we were able to embed light into water, amongst other things. And what I wanted to see was, could we prove that there was some type of new energy in the water once we did this? And what happened was we would put the water through a phase change. So in this case, we'd want to freeze the water and just go from a liquid to a solid. That would be a simple phase change. And in doing so, the water did something unexpected. It imploded. Now, you can't compress water, so the way that this showed up is that a vortex funnel, like a tornado, showed up in the center of the water, and ice crystals formed that were like threads, and the ice crystals spiraled into the center of the glass beaker that the water was put into. So we could show, and we later on proved this in human beings, that you could take different types of substances, let's say fruits and vegetables, and you could put light into them, give it to somebody to eat, they would consume it, and this light would be released into the body and would start healing the body.
Wow. So is that something that you're actively doing with food?
Yes.
This is really cool. Because, yeah, I mean, you were mentioning the years you were in college, and I'm adding up the numbers. I'm like, you do not look as old as you are at all.
2 months away from turning 61.
Good grief.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. I can't believe it.
But you don't at all look 61 for those of you listening on the podcast.
I appreciate
that. If you met David, you would guess, I don't know, mid 40s.
Thank you.
So,
trying for 30s now. Yeah.
It's funny. My husband and I have this conversation because he, whenever we discover a new technology or a new technique to support our the aging process, and he's like, I'm going to live to be 120. And I'm like, okay, well, you have fun. I'm good at till 90. I have other places to be, but maybe you'll change my mind.
Well, so what this is really about is not aging and being productive. From the perspective of society, is that if we have technology that heals the body with light, it's relatively inexpensive compared to some other things. Doesn't have toxic side effects, incredibly therapeutic, and we could, if governments were to adopt light therapy, that would mean we could drive down healthcare costs and use that money for other things. Hopefully not war. Hopefully feeding the homeless, giving people places to live, and making society and our world a better place. But it's certainly what I'm finding in my research is that light therapy is unbelievably powerful. And it certainly is the future of medicine.
Yes, I think so too. And if not adopted by the mainstream institutions, it will be cultivated by people like you and purchased by people like me, and we'll create our own side ecosystem. Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead.
And, the other reason I think to do this is to empower people. Not just with information, but with technology that they can use. We know that there is going to be something around the corner. The pandemic, there's certainly been talk by World Health Organization and others that there is another pandemic coming. Whether or not that's fear-mongering or there really is something else, who knows. But I think from the perspective that when this pandemic hit, many people were scared. They felt unprepared. They didn't know what to believe. And unfortunately, many people chose to take the vaccine, thinking it was safe. And now we know that it was anything but safe. So, being able to empower people with technology to support their health, where they can say, no, I'm not taking an experimental drug. I'm just fine. My health is safe. I don't need to fear. Those are the type of things that we need to be doing.
Yes, and that makes so much sense because we are much more easily manipulated when we feel uncertain and we don't know how to, take care of ourselves. And so, yeah, I was able to make a lot of informed decisions, but I was already like very deeply connected to a lot of experts who were able to break down things for me in a way that I felt I understood enough to make a decision. And so, yeah, I think it's absolutely crucial if we understand all of this a little bit more, and then we can choose things that ideally don't have side effects, which light therapy does not. So, okay, so let's talk about, so all of you've been developing this over decades, and it's now comes in the light therapy you were talking about now comes in a small patch. It's like about the size of a little circle band-aid, but it's clear, and you put it on a meridian point in your body, and depending which crystals are in the patch, it has a slightly different effect. Is that accurate?
So the patches that we have, they will stimulate the skin with different wavelengths of light for producing different effects. So we have one product called X39. It just happened to be the 39th product that I invented, so it got
Okay.
that number. And what it does is it stimulates the skin with light, and it turns on production of copper peptide, which is a tripeptide composed of glycine, histidine, and lysine, and it has a very, very high affinity for bonding with copper. And this peptide is really special in the body. We start out with high levels of copper peptide when we're younger, and then after the age of 60, those levels decline. So if we can turn on copper peptide, we can reclaim some of our youth. It will reset about 1/3 of the human genome to a more youthful state. So it's a very powerful anti-aging product.
Okay, so let's drill down on this. So this product stimulates, basically it helps us make more stem cells.
Well, okay, so yes, but let's talk about how it gets there, because
Okay.
that's super important. So
Okay.
you put the patch on, and it stimulates the skin with low levels of light. This will turn on energy production in the mitochondria, and now once the cell has more energy, it can start to make peptides. A very important intracellular peptide antioxidant would be glutathione, as one example. But this other peptide, GHK, known as copper peptide, it's important because what it does is it resets genes to a more youthful state, about 1/3 of the human genome. And some of those genes are associated with managing inflammation. Some of those genes are associated with managing antioxidant production, so you get those benefits. One of those genes is P63, and the P63 gene turns on mobilization of stem cells. So people get injured, and now the stem cells can mobilize and get to an injury site. Another thing that happens that's very interesting is that there was a study out of Korea that showed that GHK can function as a Yamanaka factor. So the Yamanaka factors are where we take a differentiated stem cell. So let's say the example is a skin stem cell. So in stem cells, we would start with, let's say, pluripotent cells, then they go to multipotent. As they differentiate, they become more specialized, and then they go into the specialized tissue. Well, if we take a skin stem cell and we expose it to a Yamanaka factor, like copper peptide, it will revert into a pluripotent stem cell. So what was found was that you give people injections of copper peptide, now the number of circulating stem cells increases, and it's because it's converting differentiated stem cells back into pluripotent stem cells.
Okay, but the patch, there is no exogenous substance being injected. You have found a way to have that same copper peptide, basically the frequency of copper peptide. I don't know, finish the sentence. I'm a little lost.
No, that's okay. No, you're doing great. I mean, that is exactly correct.
Okay.
Is that you put the patch on and it elevates copper peptide. And we know this because we've done 9 clinical studies where we take people's blood and we look at their blood levels of copper peptide before and after the light therapy, and we see the copper peptide levels go up. And then we take urine samples and we look at before and after, and so we see the metabolism improves, synthesis of amino acids improves. So we see not only does copper peptide increase, but we see the effects of the elevated copper peptide. And it's basically turning on all of these systems that help support the healing process.
Okay, so once that's been turned on, we're supporting the healing process. That looks like what? Like improved sleep, improved skin. What are some of the benefits of this?
Sleep is a really
not that we're making any medical claims here. We're just
no, we're not making medical.
We're just noticing what happens when someone uses a patch. Okay.
Well, sleep is an interesting one because when people think of stem cell therapy and getting an injection of stem cells, they wouldn't normally associate that with improved sleep.
Right.
People go and get a stem cell injection because they have a sore knee or shoulder, an old injury that they want healed. What's interesting about this is that because we're not injecting stem cells into the body, what we're really doing is getting the stem cells that are already in the body to act like younger cells. What happens is that we're tapping into the communication system that already exists in our bodies. So you elevate copper peptide, and this causes an increase in GABA. So it puts the body into a relaxed state. The GABA will signal an increase in BDNF. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and BDNF is the signaling molecule that manages stem cell activity in the brain. So we did a study with Dr. Gaetan Chevalier because people were using our patch and saying, I'm sleeping really well when I use this product. And I wanted to understand what was going on. That wasn't very clear to me in the beginning days of this. And so we worked with this fellow, Dr. Gaetan Chevalier, who's very well known in energy medicine. He's done a lot of studies on earthing, and he's also done work into nuclear fusion at UCLA. So he's a pretty bright guy. Okay. And we did these brain scans using a P3 EEG system. And we saw that after 3 weeks of using X39, that the brain was going into a state of coherence. So we saw evidence that you wear this product and it's improving sleep because it's improving the homeostasis of the brain, which improves everything else.
Incredible. And so, and just to clarify, there's nothing coming out of the patch going into the body. It's really the patch is reflecting the light of the body at a frequency that is stimulating all of these changes.
So what's really important is that if people have a healthy diet, they supplement where they need to, exercise, drink water, have a healthy lifestyle, And basically, if they have all of the building blocks they need in their bodies, then when they use this technology, the technology will use that nutrition to support healing. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay. So we have our foundational health in place, and then this is augmenting it. So tell me some of your favorite things that happen when you wear this patch. I mean, I will say I tried it, and I have an inner council of people who I consult before I, will do a podcast with someone who has a product, because I want to, sort of, there's people whose opinions I very much trust. And everyone was like, yeah, no, they're really good. These patches are really good.
That's cool.
They're really cool. I'm like, okay. So then I tried it, and I wasn't sure that I would notice an effect, because I generally feel quite well, because I take care of the foundational aspects you just mentioned. I'd add circadian rhythms in there. Yeah. But I was quite surprised to notice, like, even within the first day, that my mental clarity was significantly improved. And as I said, I thought I was doing okay. So I was like, oh, wow, okay. So what are some things that you and your team have noticed in terms of benefits?
So there are things that I would put into the anecdotal, and then others that we found through clinical studies. Okay. So when we do our studies, we want to look at how do people feel with this? How's their overall vitality and wellness? What's the quality of their sleep? What other things are they noticing? So we do quantify that and run the statistics on it to see the science. But there are other things that occur that are more like in the realm of science fiction, where I would say, I really want to understand what's happening with that person, because if we can understand that, then we can maybe help a lot of other people with it. So some people that have used this, the very first time that we saw it, there's a woman in Denmark. My wife is Danish, and we have people that use our product in Denmark. And there's a woman back a few years ago. She was 93 at the time, and she's still going strong now. And she looked like a elderly, sick 93-year-old. And her daughter was using X39 and thought, okay, well, maybe my mom can benefit to this and help her feel better and so forth. So she gave it to her mom. And in 2 months, it looked like she had reversed in age about 20 years. I actually have the picture, but I know most of your viewers won't be able to see it.
Well, you can hold it up. If people want to see it, you can go to YouTube.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Or you can send it to me later, and I can put it in the show notes. Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So we see these.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we see these effects where people look like, they've reversed in age within a very, very short period of time. I would say we have other people that within about 2-3 months, they start to look physically younger, and this would be something that's pretty typical. Every once in a while, we get these cases where people have these dramatic effects on age reversal. And of course, their health improves as a consequence. Right. So I would say that's probably my favorite thing. One of my favorites, certainly. Yeah. And because I think there's a lot to learn there, a lot to understand. And by understanding them, we can help many, many people.
Yeah. Because something that I wasn't really aware of till I started researching for this interview was how prevalent stem cell injections are becoming as an anti-aging treatment, and they're really expensive, like tens of thousands of dollars, and they don't necessarily, like, if they work, but they don't necessarily work, and it involves like getting a needle and having something put into your body, whereas what this is doing is you're getting a similar effect, but your body is doing it itself.
I would say in the medical community, they seem to have, let's say if someone's an orthopedic surgeon, the way that they get educated is to say, well, when someone is bone on bone, they need to have a knee replacement. But it's like, wait a minute, that cartilage that was there, right? The body put that there. So why can't we just make more cartilage? And in orthopedics, it was always taught, once you lose the cartilage, it's gone, you can't do anything. And that really doesn't make a lot of scientific sense. So, of course, research was done to inject stem cells into the body. And what did they find? The stem cells can regenerate the cartilage. Well, I found out from a chiropractor back in 2006, this fellow Bern Friedlander, working with the San Francisco 49ers. He was regenerating lost cartilage in the knees for football players back without stem cell injections by giving the body what it needed to turn on the stem cells. So basically, the message was, in these young athletes, this doesn't quite work as well for people that are older, but the good news, light therapy does work, is that if you gave people enough collagen protein, which has all of the amino acids that are necessary to regenerate cartilage, and vitamin C and glutathione, that would repair the cartilage and repair the knee without surgery. We found this out years later with light therapy. If you use light to turn on glutathione, it would act as a trigger and you would get more cartilage in the knee.
Wow. Okay, so I just, I think this is really an incredible gift you've given to the world, to be able to have these health benefits without really taking anything, without drugs. And it's like an incredibly natural way to rejuvenate the body. And I think it's interesting, it does sound like science fiction. And I have to say, I had these patches in my cupboard for a really long time before I tried them. So I was like, what is this? But I am a walking testament that there was absolutely an effect. And I was so surprised that I immediately was like, okay, I need to find this person. This is unbelievable. So thank you for persevering. And thank you also just for, what you said earlier about supporting people to keep looking for a solution, even when they feel like there's no hope. Because you just never know what's around the corner, as you're explaining this, right? Like, this could be something that could really help somebody.
People should never give up hope. There are always solutions. My daughter, 2 years ago, was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. And it was, she didn't know if she was going to die or what was going to happen. She didn't want to go through the rabbit hole. I'm happy it happened, and so is she, because she elected not to have her thyroid removed. She elected to go for natural therapies. So she went on, as soon as we found out, we put her on a number of different natural therapies, some of which I can't talk about because I don't want to make a medical claim. She immediately got better once we knew that the problem was there. And in testing, you could see that the tumor that was there wasn't growing. It eventually shrank and went away. And her doctor, after a year, had to eventually admit, okay, you're cancer free.
Wow.
It empowered her. Going through that, it empowered her to know, if I find myself in this situation again later in life, I know what to do. I'm not going to be scared, and I know that there's options. So I would just use that as one testament to the power of prayer and knowing that there are always natural solutions.
Yes. And that feeling of empowerment that comes from having the freedom to make our own health choices, which I think is so important, because our intuitive sense often will lead us to the place where we need to go if we allow it to. And for some people, that place may be, a pharmaceutical or surgical intervention as needed, of course. But there's also lots of other things out there if those options don't pan out. And the ability to trust ourselves is, I think, foundational even beyond anything we can do physically. So thank you for bringing that message, and thank you for bringing these products. You have a truly exceptional mind, and it's just fascinating. I could talk to you for a long time. So thanks for sharing all of that.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Woohoo! You made it to the end.